Welcome to the RotoWire Prospect Podcast. I'm your host, James Anderson. Clay Link is off this week, and we're going to do a mailbag episode. I know you guys like these a lot. Got a lot of great questions from everyone. They're mostly going to focus on prospects and dynasty leagues. Wanted to mention a few things at the top, though, before we get into those. Just put up an article last night on Tuesday ranking my top 50 prospects just for 2022 value. So this is essentially volume 3 of the prospects for 2022 articles I've been putting out. And I veered off from the tier approach and I combined the hitters and pitchers. This is kind of what I would use if I were you going into drafts this weekend. 15 team mixers. If you're still doing draft and holds, you're not going to be looking at more than maybe a dozen of these guys in regular redraft leagues with 7-man benches, but good names to file away for fab for later in the season and kind of just a spring training viewer guide, guys to keep an eye on when you're tuning in to watch certain teams play. So check that out on the site, rotowire.com/pod for a free 10-day trial. I think you'll dig that. Also wanted to mention the Highlander Dynasty Invitational is off the ground and running. We just finished the 4th round in that. For those who don't know, this was a brainchild of Brett Sayre from Baseball Prospectus. He called me about, I want to say like 3 weeks ago. And, we were kind of bemoaning the fact that it's been really hard to be in a quote unquote expert dynasty league that is sort of a sustainable format. You've all played in dynasty leagues where things kind of go off the wire or off the rails, I should say, with owners making lopsided trades or owners kind of not paying attention to the league anymore and just, sort of it becoming a league where the same 5-6 teams are competing every year and the same 10 teams just don't have a chance. And we wanted to try to start something that would be legitimately sustainable. And we've really kind of tweaked the rules. I urge you to check out that constitution. You can probably find links to it on my Twitter or Brett's Twitter. Jesse Roach is also a founding member, and Ian Kahn is on the board, the Highlander board, and the hope is to maybe do another Highlander league next year. But I think it's definitely worth checking out this draft so far. Like I said, we are through the 4th round, 20 teams. This is really kind of the best of the best in terms of experienced, serious dynasty players. I was picking 11th, and I went Ozzie Albies, Eloy Jimenez, Riley Green, and Alek Manoah with my first 4 picks. It's a 5x5 batting average league. Very on brand there. Of course, I like the age that I'm kind of going with there. The idea between going with Albies with my first pick is that I could pivot to a more kind of concrete win now strategy if I wanted to, but he's also young enough at 25 where I could pivot to a play for the future strategy if that's where I thought the value was. And so that's definitely what I'm doing. I don't really expect to win this year with Riley Green as my 3rd pick. Wouldn't expect that, but I think I can put together a really good roster and be very competitive for years to come. I'll put a link to that draft and maybe a link to the Constitution in the show notes if you want to check that out. And then one more note just before I get to all these great questions is, I got, say, 4 questions maybe where the people were wanting to know my take on guys in the draft, in the 2022 draft, the upcoming draft. I just really want to put it out there and stress that I am not a expert on amateur players. I, I have a lot on my plate. focusing on pro prospects, focusing on dynasty ranks, and focusing on redraft. And I also have some stuff sort of behind the scenes at RotoWire that I'm in charge of. So it would be completely unrealistic and kind of impossible for me to be good at all those things. And I chose a long time ago to not try to be good at amateur scouting. I mean, you in like big league front offices, most of the time, unless you're talking about the general manager, you have pro scouts, you have amateur scouts. Maybe you have like a really good scout who's in the southeast or something who looks at pros and amateurs, that type of thing. But for the most part, staying on top of just pro prospects, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, that's a full-time job in and of itself. And so trying to follow what's happening with the amateur market year round to me is just not a good use of my time. And there's also the fact that the valuations, like if you look at a mock draft in October and then a mock draft in May, things are going to be very different. And so I just don't think it's a useful exercise for me to try to stay on top of things as it's all changing anyway. So what I do every year is about 6 weeks before the draft, I really hunker down, and it's kind of like I'm spending 6 weeks cramming for a big test where I'm really trying to know the player pool as best as I can. Probably around 70, 80 players deep or so, that I can say like with confidence, like what I think this player is, what I think he could become. And to me, that's worked well over the years. And so I don't want to give you guys answers to questions about the 2022 draft and pretend that I'm an expert on it when I'm just not. I recommend you subscribe to Baseball America. I recommend you subscribe to the Prospects Live Patreon. I mean, there's really good sites that do a really good job covering amateurs. So please support them. I mean, that's kind of who I look to when it comes that time. But I know Drew Jones, I know Elijah Green, I know Tamar Johnson. Those guys all kind of look the part of future elite pro prospects, but I can't tell you with any confidence right now who my number one guy from this class is going to be because we have to let the process play out. Like it'll probably just be whichever one of those three amateurs has the best senior season, and I don't know who that's going to be yet. So sorry if you had a question about the 2022 draft. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on that. But let's get to the questions that I can answer. The first one is from Johnny Sauce, and his question is Ryan Pepio good? Pepio, obviously a pitching prospect with the Dodgers. I think Pepio has good stuff. I don't think he is a starter in the majors. I think the term multi-inning reliever gets thrown out a lot relative to how many of those there actually are in the big leagues. But I think Pepio is kind of a classic, go get 5, 6, 7 outs type of guy. Probably going to strike a lot of people out, probably going to walk a lot of people. I don't think he's a starter long term. Maybe he could take a step forward this year and prove me wrong, but he's close enough to the majors where I would expect him to be kind of working out of that bullpen sometime this summer. Got a couple questions from Steven Gerber. He's in a rebuild mode, and he is looking to convert Corbin Burns into future assets and wants to know what he should look for. If you look at that Highlander Dynasty Invitational draft, Corbin Burns went 2 picks after Julio Rodriguez. I think he went 4 or 5 picks after Bobby Witt. But he also went like a round and a half ahead of the next best prospect, Riley Green. So if I have Corbin Burns and I'm in complete rebuild mode, I'm contacting whoever has Julio Rodriguez, assuming they are a contender, and I'm just trying to figure out how we can do something. Burns for Julio. Maybe I have to throw in something else with Burns to get Julio. But I'm really going to exhaust that specific trade until it's very clear to me from the Julio owner that it's not going to happen. From there, I would move on to the Bobby Witt owner. Maybe something where a guy like Eloy is the headliner and you get another prospect thrown in. But I'm really stressing quality over quantity on a Corbin Burnes return. And, I wouldn't be in a massive rush to get this done right now if you can't get the deal you want. Uh, Corbin Burnes is so good, and Corbin Burnes is going to move the needle so much for those teams that are contending this year that once we get a month or two into the season, someone's going to suffer a serious injury to one of the pitchers they were counting on this year. And they're going to be desperate. They're going to look at their team. They're going to think they have a team that can win the championship. And you're going to be holding Corbin Burnes, and you should be able to get almost whatever you want at that point. So do everything you can to get Julio Rodriguez. Move on to Bobby Witt then from there. If you get a no on those guys, I just would hold out and just kind of see how this plays out. Of course, Corbin Burnes could suffer an injury, and then you're kind of left SOL. But that's the way I would play it. I mean, when you have a guy that good, you can't really afford to mess this up from a return standpoint. Like if you end up getting, like Anthony Volpe and Marco Luciano or something like that, I really think you're just gonna look back on that and regret it. So try to get Julio, and then from there you might have to hold and hope that a team gets desperate in season. But don't be afraid to go after young big leaguers too. You don't have to just look at prospects if you're in a complete rebuild. Like I said, a guy like Eloy Jimenez is a good guy to try to buy low right now. Steven also wanted to know how to find a committed dynasty league. This is a really tough thing. If Brett and I had started the Highlander Dynasty Invitational a couple months ago, we would have explored a way for the very best people that didn't get into the league. We had 125 applications. I think we would have explored a way to try to form a sort of a satellite league with another 20 guys, and then maybe another satellite league with another 20 managers or something like that, just because we have this resource basically of a ton of really good dynasty players on hand. So that's kind of a shame that we couldn't do that this year. We just kind of ran out of time. But that might be something that we explore next year, where I might just say, hey, like message the Highlander Twitter account if you're interested in being a part of a very serious dynasty startup league. So that might be something we look at next year. If you're trying to join a dynasty league between now and opening day, you're probably not going to find one, to be honest. But you can always look on like Reddit. You can always do a search on Twitter and try to find something that way. But it's really hard to join a good dynasty league. Next question is from Casimir. He wants to know if my opinion has changed at all regarding Mackenzie Gore. I was actually texting a friend of the show, Chris Welsh, today. It's just this Mackenzie Gore stuff, to me, and I think he kind of echoed this. It's really wish casting on the part of people who have Mackenzie Gore or are invested in some way in Mackenzie Gore being good. I've heard people reference a new delivery. Welsh has seen him in person. He actually doesn't necessarily buy that. The point is, like, Mackenzie Gore is certainly capable of having a really good inning, or maybe even a really good couple innings in a spring outing. That's not very surprising. Lots of pitchers with his raw stuff are capable of that type of thing, especially in spring training. If we look up, a couple weeks and Mackenzie Gore has thrown 14, 15 innings, he's got, 18 Ks and 3 walks, and he's going He's been going kind of steadily, 2, 3, 4 innings in his last few outings. Then we probably got to take that seriously, but uh, I'm not buying it right now. It's to me, I think a lot of it is mental with him, and he's had just the stuff isn't as good as it used to be. The off speed stuff specifically, and then the fastball command, uh, as Welsh has documented on his podcast. He can locate the fastball at 94 pretty well, but he can't locate it at 98 or 97 very well. So I'm still very low on Gore. He could of course prove me wrong. I was very low on Lucas Giolito the year that he was the worst starting pitcher in baseball, and he turned things around. So would never say never, but I'm not going to just be like, oh yeah, I'm back in on Mackenzie Gore because he had a good spring performance and he's working with a different pitching coach or whatever. Like, I think a lot of you are just kind of hoping for that to be true and wanting it to be true. But to me, there's just not enough evidence to suggest that it is true. Next question is from David Vidal. He wants to know how much I like Christian Robinson now. Robinson, of course, with the Diamondbacks, former top 20 prospect. You know, there was a good report a while ago about him, being back and at the spring complex and everything. But then there was a report, I think a couple days ago, about how he's actually still serving his 18 months of probation before he can get a work visa, which is necessary for him to play in games where there is a paid attendance. So he's capable of playing in these spring games, backfield, extended spring training. He'll be able to keep playing in Arizona, I think, in those games into the season. But it doesn't sound like he's eligible yet to go out to like their high A affiliate. Just something to monitor, but man, I mean, this is just such a frustrating situation. To me, I think he's served the appropriate amount of time and then some for what happened, especially when you take in the context of things. And it definitely seems like this is going to affect his development. I think we kind of have to assume it has and assume it will until proven otherwise. I'll keep him ranked, probably keep him ranked around 200 on the top 400, but I don't think we're out of the woods yet on this one with Christian Robinson. Next question is from Zaddy Guerrero. Zaddy wants to know who's the Andre 3000 of prospects, and then in parentheses, favorite prospect named Jackson, and who's the big boy of prospects, in parentheses, you like the way he moves. Favorite prospect named Jackson, I'll say Jackson Jobe. Boring answer there. Favorite prospect who I like the way he moves, I'll say Christian Hernandez with the Cubs. He's just really great actions in in the batter's box. Beautiful swing. Really, kind of a live wire. Very excited to see how Hernandez does this year in the Arizona Complex League. Chris from Baseball Pods wants to know if there are any A's prospect starting pitchers who I think might be relevant in a 15-team mixed league. I know people have talked a little bit about Colin Pellews. I think he's more of a 2023 guy. They're going to obviously see if this is the year with AJ Puck and Dalton Jeffries. I think with both those guys, they've proven time and time again they cannot handle a starter's workload. So I am just not going to buy it on Puck or Jeffries. If they do put it all together, that'd be awesome. I know AJ Puck ate a lot of food and put on like 25 pounds in hopes of that helping. I don't know if that'll help because now he's just 6'7" and bigger, and I could see that leading to injuries as well. So Who knows? I don't trust Puck or Jeffries to stay healthy, though. A couple kind of unlikely guys that could be 15-team mixed league relevant, but guys who I think are definitely going to get a shot at some point this year. Zach Logue, who they got from the Blue Jays, and Adam Oler, who they got from the Mets. I think both those guys on the 40 man, I believe, experience at AAA, success at AAA. They're both more kind of number 5 starter types, but I wouldn't be super surprised if the A's turned one of them into someone that you could at least sort of stream, like against the Rangers or something like that. But I really think it's going to be a rough year for A's fans. I it's easy for me to say, but if you're an A's fan, just root for your fantasy teams for the next few years. Chris also wanted to know what my thoughts are on Junior Caminero. He was the prospect from the Dominican Summer League that Tampa Bay got from Cleveland for Tobias Myers. There's actually quite a bit of buzz on Caminero. I took Caminero in the Devils Rejects first year player draft that Chris is also in, just because I knew I was going to talk about him on this podcast, and so I just wanted to get him locked up before I talked about him here. But yeah, there's a lot of praise for Caminero in the scouting community. I think he could be a guy who really shoots up lists sooner than later. Probably going to have to wait until the Florida Complex League on him, but really kind of a classic corner infield hit and power combination there. So look for Caminero to possibly break out this year. John Vitovet wants to know if Josh Lowe will make the Rays out of spring training and what are realistic expectations for him. I hoped that he would. Doesn't look like he will unless something happens with a trade of Kiermaier, Meadows, or Margot. I know there've been rumors about Meadows being shopped. Doesn't seem like anything's come of that yet. So I would expect Lowe to probably open the year at AAA, and then maybe we see him in a month. Someone could always get injured as well. But in 15 teamers, I still think you can draft Lowe. It's just really tough to find guys that have it's very obvious that he has 20/20 upside, and then maybe down the road even 25/25 or 30/30 upside possibly. So a guy that has that type of power and speed, even if you only get him for 5 months, I think is worth a roster spot in a 15 teamer. Probably not in a 12 teamer for me though, unless we do hear that he's going to make the team. John wanted to know, what type of player is Lowe going to be? I kind of think he's going to I think his ceiling is prime Carlos Gomez, but with better OBP skills. So that's a hell of a player. That's my ceiling comp on him. Of course, he could be worse than that. I'm not expecting Josh Lowe to be a guy who hits 270 or 280, but I think he could hit 250. But it's just really all about the power and the speed with Lowe. Toolsy wants to know if I'm buying low on Royce Lewis once he shows he's healthy, and then where will Royce Lewis play on the Twins now that they have Carlos Correa? I think the time to buy low is now. I expect Royce Lewis to be healthy. He was coming back from an injury that most guys come back from. That it would be pretty surprising to me if Royce Lewis didn't come back from that. And it seems like he is healthy from everything I can find. So I'm interested in buying low on Royce Lewis. He's moved into kind of boomer bust territory as a prospect because it's just going to come down to the hit tool. He's had that big leg kick, timing mechanism issues, but he also was talking with Jeff Ponce about this on the Baseball America pod the other day about how Pensacola might have been a tough place for him to hit. Royce Lewis still has just a crazy fantasy ceiling. Like he has the power and the bat speed to be a 25 plus homer guy. He has the foot speed to be a 25 to 30 steal guy. and he's on the 40 man. He's going to head to AAA this year. Like there just aren't many guys like that who are this close to the majors, have this type of pedigree, this type of upside. So I'd be trying to buy low on Lewis for sure. And then Toolsy wanted to know where will he play. The nice thing about Lewis is he could pretty much play anywhere on the field. He showed that in the Arizona Fall League. He could play third base, shortstop, second base, left field, center field, right field. Doesn't really matter. Like if he hits, there'll be a spot for him. And there's even a chance that he could be a guy who every year has eligibility at multiple spots. So I'm not done with Royce Lewis. He could still bust completely. That's in play as well, but I think he's worth rolling the dice on. Colin Campbell wanted to know Luis Matos versus Michael Harris, highest long-term ceiling, and then could either guy be the number one overall prospect someday? Very, very similar prospects, which is just what I think Campbell's getting at here. But Matos, higher ceiling for me, just because I think he could have a 70 grade hit tool. I think they're both going to be very similar from a power speed upside standpoint. Harris is more of like a plus hit tool if it all works out. So, Matos to me, like there's some shades of Bo Bichette just in the outfield. And obviously, that's a heck of a player. Michael Harris is more, he's more kind of like, I don't know, 2020 with like a 285 average, which is great too, if it all works out. But Matos's hit tool is kind of the separator for me and why I've got him a little bit ahead of Harris. But I think Harris could be undervalued in some leagues. And then, I think either guy could be the number one overall prospect in a year. Like they're both talented enough. They both have the requisite tools. So I don't think I would project that, but I think both of them, I wouldn't be surprised if we looked up in a year and one of them was the number one overall prospect. All right, let's head to a quick message. Are you looking for a new platform for your fantasy baseball league? Fantrax's free MLB Fantasy League Manager is the most customizable, easy to use, and feature-rich platform in the industry. Fantrax offers the most in-depth player pool in the industry, including minor league players. Fantrax offers Dynasty, Keeper, Redraft, and Best Ball leagues. The Highlander Dynasty Invitational is on Fantrax, rightfully so. Coming from another service, Fantrax makes the process easy. Fantrax can import any of your current leagues and customize if needed. Sign up for free today and be entered to win Fantrax's MLB Game Day experience, which includes tickets to any MLB regular season game for your entire league and $1,000 towards travel and accommodations. All you have to do is host your fantasy baseball league on Fantrax to be entered. The more leagues you create, the more chances you have to win. Simply go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. All right, next question is from Chad. He wants to know, how is Anthony Volpe affected by the Yankees trading for Isaiah Kiner-Falefa? And how does Volpe's hit tool compare to other high-profile prospects like Wander Franco and Jared Kelenic? I just don't think it matters that they got Kiner-Falefa. He's a glove first shortstop who, they've been lacking in terms of shortstop defense in recent seasons. So I'm sure that they had been itching to get a guy like this, but he's not going to stand in the way of Volpe. The thing about the Yankees, though, is like they just never really seem to rush their prospects, and they usually end up trading their prospects. Like Gleyber Torres is easily the last position player prospect they've actually graduated into regular playing time. And I just think Volpe is more of a 2023 guy. I don't expect him to be up this year. I don't expect the Yankees to treat Kiner-Falefa as some sort of everyday player long term, or even this year. I think he's just more of kind of a guy that you put in for defense. I would take the under on like 450 plate appearances from this year. And then how does Volpe's hit tool compare to guys like Franco, Kelenic? Definitely doesn't compare to Franco. I mean, Franco had a legendary hit tool. That's what made him so special. Um, Franco was never just a big time power guy or a big time speed guy, but what he did have was an 80 great hit tool. I could see comparing Volpe to Kalanick. The guy that I actually compare him to a lot, and maybe a cautionary comparison is remember like after the 2018 season, how high I was and how high a lot of people were on Gavin Lux after he kind of, he was not a low pedigree guy, but he sort of came from off of the radar a little bit to have just a monster season. And he was looking like a 70 grade hit tool power speed guy. That's kind of reminiscent to what Volpe's season last year was like. Now Volpe's, his hard hit data backs up the breakout. I was one of the first, if not the first person to rank him as like a top 20 prospect. So I'm not hating on Volpe, but I would just pump the brakes on assuming that he is a can't miss guy. Mark Gannon wants to know how I would rank Riley Green, Jared Kelenic, Brendan Davis, CJ Abrams, Joe Adell, and Brandon Marsh over the next 2 to 3 years. He can keep any and all of them in a 16-team league for the same cost. Definitely keep Green, Kelenic, Davis, and Abrams. Probably keep Adell. If I threw one guy back, it'd be Marsh. If I threw two guys back, it would be both Angels, just because I like Davis a ton. Abrams, who knows when he'll be up, but his upside is so great that I wouldn't throw him back. Dan wants to know if there are any prospect values moving significantly due to spring training performance or usage. I kind of tried to show this in that top 50 prospects article that dropped on Tuesday. But Reed Detmers, I mean, confirmation bias alert for sure with Reed Detmers, but he looked like as good as I hoped he would look, and then some in his spring debut. So Detmers, I think, is a guy that now I think you might be wanting to take around pick 300. Nick Lodolo's looked very good. Cade Cavalli's looked good. Roansy Contreras. I think all three of those guys, Lodolo, Cavalli, and Roansy Contreras, are guys who, you definitely want to at least follow them the rest of spring training, but, they could break camp in their rotations. And then I think the three most interesting hitting prospects in terms of spring performance are Julio Rodriguez, CJ Abrams, and O'Neal Cruz. Rodriguez, it's just like he's so like the Mariners have been so clear about manipulating his service time. Like he had no business going to high A last year. He didn't even get to AAA last year because of how much they sort of suppressed him. But is he the best player on the Mariners 40-man roster? Like he might be. So keep following what he does in spring training. If he is just clearly the class of that team, who knows when he debuts? I'm still just going to guess that it's June, but I'd be following Julio. CJ Abrams, like I think on a lot of teams, he'd be up in 2023, and it would just be as simple as that. All the missed time he's had. On this team, though, AJ Preller is so desperate to save his job, and he had success rushing Fernando Tatis to the majors. I could see him just going down with his favorite guys, and it's not like Abrams has a ton of guys to get past for playing time. So keep an eye on CJ Abrams. Again, I'm not drafting any of these guys really in regular redraft leagues, but they're so talented. You could kind of talk your way into them debuting sooner than we expect. And then O'Neal Cruz, obviously, it's going to be fascinating to watch the Pirates with a straight face send him to AAA if he keeps smashing like this. It does seem like that will happen, but man, I mean, if he has 8 homers when we look up in like 2 weeks, are they really going to send him to AAA? Probably, but man, that would be a huge bummer. Dan also wanted to know if I expect Stephen Kwan to break camp with Cleveland and what my outlook is for his 2022. Kwan is, I would say, legitimately competing for a spot on the opening day roster in Cleveland. They have openings in that outfield. Kwan is probably already one of their 5 or 6 best pure hitters. I think his power output last year in the upper levels, it overstates what I would expect from him as a big leaguer. I think it was just, this guy might have a 70 grade hit tool and he was like 24. And if that's the case, just those 2 things, and you're playing at AA and AAA, you're going to hit homers unless you're Nick Madrigal or something like that. So I wouldn't expect him to be a 25 homer guy. I've comped his ceiling to Michael Brantley. And with the good, you got to take the bad there. Obviously, Michael Brantley is one of the best pure hitters of his generation, but he's not a big power guy, not a big speed guy. And if you take Michael Brantley's stats and you say instead of being a 310 hitter, you're a 260 hitter, then he's kind of unrosterable. I mean, then you're kind of talking about like I don't know, like the bad version of Adam Frazier at that point. So with Stephen Kwan, you're really betting on the hit tool and betting on the hit tool showing up as a rookie. Otherwise, I just don't think he can provide value in mixed leagues. So I haven't been ending up with him in a ton of leagues, but the bat to ball ability with him is really special. So maybe it translates right away. You could maybe even compare him to like Luis Arias with a bit more pop, and obviously a bit more speed. I mean, Arias isn't a runner. Artur wants to know, or he said, you and Clay Link were all over Freddie Peralta and Trevor Rogers last season. What later round SPs are you targeting this year? I assume Artur means that we were all over Alek Manoah and Trevor Rogers. I don't think we were all over Freddie Peralta, but we were all over Alek Manoah and Trevor Rogers last season. Reed Detmers, like I said, targeting him everywhere. I think he could be a big time breakout guy. Carlos Hernandez with the Royals, although Sal Perez's catching or lack of catching is a concern there, but I mean, Hernandez is monster stuff. Eric Lauer with the Brewers. I think a lot of people are sleeping on Lauer. Corey Kluber. I've said that I think Kluber could be this year's Adam Wainwright in terms of just like a super old guy going around pick 300, 350 who returns top 20 SP value. And then Nestor Cortez with the Yankees. We've touched on, I think, most of these guys before, but those are the guys that I've been ending up with a ton after pick 300. Mike Genre wants to know, after a few spring homers, is now the best time to move Joe Adell? Always comes down to just what are you moving him for? You don't just trade a guy for whatever you can get in a situation like this. I would maybe make him available. If you can do that without just putting him on your trade block, if you can kind of engage an owner in your league that you think might be into Adell without mentioning Adell and just sort of seeing if he brings him up, that might be a way to go about it. But unless you're getting something, kind of a no doubt top 125 dynasty guy, something like that, maybe top 150. I'd maybe just sort of see where this goes. Adell is talented enough where he could keep hitting homers in the spring and the price could continue to go up. I am worried about his batting average in the majors, and I think his speed is extremely overrated, but he's incredibly talented, still very young. John Hollingshed wants to know if I usually recommend using prospects as trade chips or waiting on them to develop. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule here. If we're talking about a prospect who is, let's say, outside the top 50, I'm basically always looking to trade them. There's maybe some exceptions. Like I don't think I'm shopping Elliot de la Cruz right now, but just you're kind of run of the mill, like number 60 overall prospect. I'm looking to trade him. I just think that the bust rate on those guys is much higher than people want to admit. And especially when it's a guy who hasn't really failed yet, you can usually cash out a handful of guys in that 50 to 100 range for something really good. And you rarely end up looking back on that, regretting it. You can even do that with guys in the kind of 25 to 50 range too. Like those are not slam dunks. Obviously, pitching prospects, they can blow up in your face at any moment. So trading those guys, especially when they're ways away from the majors, always makes sense to me. If we're talking about the best of the best, like I'm not trading Julio Rodriguez in a dynasty league. Like it has to be a trade offer that is just so good that I can't possibly say no. Like a true Godfather offer. Like I don't think I would trade Julio Rodriguez for Mookie Betts. I'd consider trading Julio Rodriguez for a guy like Luis Robert, but even then, it's just I don't know. With that next tier guys, you're always listening, but the better the prospect, the more likely I am to kind of just let them develop and hopefully turn into one of the better versions of themselves. Sully wants to know, with all the Cubs outfield acquisitions, is Brennan Davis still worth consideration in a keeper league? What's his ETA? Davis is still the best Cubs outfielder to have in a dynasty league. In a keeper league, maybe say a Suzuki, just because in that format you're usually just really valuing that now value. But like the Cubs are not blocking Brennan Davis. Brennan Davis is going to have every day at bats whenever he's ready. There's nobody standing in his way. There's there just isn't. Like look at that depth chart. It's Seiya Suzuki, it's Ian Happ when he's healthy, and it's Brennan Davis, and someone else is going to just miss out. That's the way it's going to go. I think Davis is up in June or July. I think there's, he had enough success for a long enough time at AAA last year. Are they going to have him spend a year and a half at AAA? I don't see it. They're already spending money. They spent money on Suzuki, Stroman. Davis is the future best player on this team. I think getting him reps now so that he's really ready to take that next step in 2023 makes way more sense than just messing with his development and keeping him down all season. And if you're going to bring him up this year, bring him up in June instead of August, right? Like, you're getting the same amount of service time either way. Brian Davino wants to know, any thoughts on Pedro Leon now that Carlos Correa is gone? Pedro Leon showing off that pull side power in spring training today. Hit a big bomb. Correa being gone doesn't really affect Leon. It affects Jeremy Pena. Jeremy Pena is going to be the shortstop. Pedro Leon's been playing center field, so that's where his wheels are going to be put to use. I still think Pedro Leon is a great buy low. And I think he could be up sometime this year. I mean, I've talked a lot about him on this pod, other pods, written about him. But I could see Leon just mashing at AAA this year and forcing the issue in June. Matt Young wants to know, an off-the-radar prospect you think is worth going after in drafts or auction for a buck or two that could go for 10 or more next year. The fact that he said auction makes me think we're talking about redraft here. So to me, he's not off the radar really, unless you're just playing in a really not competitive league. But I'll just say Reed Detmers again. I don't think you're spending money in an auction unless it's like an only league on guys who are much worse than Detmers and are prospects. So I'll say Detmers. Banksy wants to know if I would drop Sixto Sanchez in a Dynasty points league to pick up MJ Melendez, Kevin Alcantara, Brian Rocchio, or Henry Davis. I would drop Sixto Sanchez for any of them. The question is, who would I drop him for in a Dynasty points league? You know, I love Brian Rocchio the most of those four in 5x5 Roto. I think Rocchio's just got a perfect game for standard 5x5 Roto with batting average. He's going to hit for high average, 20 homers, 20 steals. I think he's going to hit first or second. In a points league, depending on your scoring, I could see MJ Melendez being the guy. And spoiler alert, I'm going to probably bump MJ Melendez up a little bit on this next update. Just becoming more and more comfortable buying into Melendez's hit tool. I think he's somehow underrated, even though he led the minors in homers last year. He's not necessarily underrated in redraft. I don't have any of him in NFBC leagues. He's going around pick 400. But I think in Dynasty, MJ Melendez might be a little underrated. And he'll be up this year. Rocchio probably won't be. Melendez has been playing some third base. And he might play enough catcher to keep that eligibility. So, the dream would just be Melendez kind of being a guy who's eligible at catcher and third base most years, which would be awesome if he's playing every day. So, in a points league, I think there's definitely a case for Melendez because Rocchio's speed doesn't really matter as much. I love Alcantara and Davis too, but probably be Melendez there. The Ulysses sect wants to know if Adam Frazier is in a timeshare at second base in Seattle, and with that loaded lineup, if he could be top 6 or 7 second baseman. How loaded is that lineup? It's a pretty good lineup. I don't think we're talking about like a Dodgers or Blue Jays lineup where it's just propelling guys into really high finishes. Adam Frazier, I think he could be an everyday guy. The big question with him is where is he hitting in that lineup? Because if he's not leading off, at least against righties, then you're talking about a guy hitting 6th or 7th who is going to hit fewer than 10 homers and steal fewer than 10 bases. So I'm just the only category that I could see Frazier being a major positive in is batting average. But I don't go after Adam Frazier's or Luis Arias's for the batting average. I can usually draft batting average fairly early, and I need guys that are going to really juice up the counting stats, and I just don't see him doing that. The Ulysses sect also wanted to know who gets the call first out of Max Meyer, George Kirby, Tristan Casas, and Nick Gonzalez. Don't think we see Nick Gonzalez till next year, so cross him off. If George Kirby stays healthy, I think we see him first. Just because I think there's not really much standing in his way, whereas Max Meyer kind of has to get past a couple guys or have a couple guys get hurt. Max Meyer's debut really kind of largely depends on the health of the guys ahead of him. So we could see him in June. We could see him in August. Tristan Casas, I'll say, comes up second out of those four. I think he's going to kind of kick the door down, I think, this year at AAA. All right. Experience a new way to play daily fantasy sports on Thrive Fantasy. Thrive Fantasy is an exciting player prop fantasy contest. With Thrive Fantasy, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus on only the top tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Sign up for Thrive Fantasy today and receive a free 6-month RotoWire subscription. Here's how you claim your free RotoWire subscription. Visit rotowire.com/thrive. Deposit a minimum of $10 and receive 100% deposit bonus up to $100. Play in your first paid contest and receive a free 6-month RotoWire subscription. All right, we are back to the questions. Zach Lambros wants to know my thoughts on Drew Rom with the Orioles and Louis Varland with the Twins. Any upside? What's their ETA? Uh, Rom and Varland both have better minor league numbers than pure stuff. I like Rom the pitcher more. I think he's pretty underrated. I like Varland's situation more, coming up with the Twins in that division with Byron Buxton behind you. Pretty good setup there. Most likely, we're talking about a couple number 5 starters, but I think I've got them both ranked on the top 400 just because they have a chance to maybe outperform that projection. Joe McHugh wants to know if I can talk a little bit about my process for determining if, when, and how a player in the 400, 600 range or later should be moved way up into the top 400. This is a great question from Joe. So my general process is that in like my personal spreadsheet for each team, I have between 10 and 20 guys who are not ranked on the top 400, sort of highlighted going into the season, who I'm going to really keep tabs on each time I do an update. And so anytime I'm doing a big update, I'm going through team by team and seeing how that kind of collection of next best prospects are doing. And the guys who are just really performing well, look into them a little further, maybe put them on the top 400. And then there's also always going to be guys who just pop up who are not guys that I had sort of pegged before the year as watch list guys. And things are so prospect dynasty prospect Twitter is just so rich these days with analysis that people are turning these guys up a lot of times even before I am. Someone I'm following is tweeting about someone who's breaking out that I wasn't on before the season, and then I can just go do some research and kind of confirm like how real I think that breakout is. But yeah, it's a great question, Joe. Always just kind of comes down to finding the guy who's performing maybe more than expected, or obviously more than expected, and then kind of like looking under the hood. How is the approach? If it's a hitter, where are they hitting? Age to level, that kind of stuff. What's their batted ball profile? What's their speed grade? All that kind of stuff. How do they profile defensively? Are they going to be an asset? Is that going to get their bat in the lineup? With a pitcher, I mean, we're definitely looking at video at that point, trying to figure out how good the pitches are. But yeah, it's a really good question, Joe. Dan wants to know which Royals first baseman do we see first out of Vinny Pasquantino and Nick Pratto? We see Pratto first. He really struggles, and then we see Pasquantino. I just think look at where they finished last year. I don't see them leapfrogging Pasquantino over Pratto. I think they're going to give Pratto a chance. I don't expect him to seize it, and I think Pasquantino will eventually get a chance. Might not see Pasquantino until next year, although maybe he just doesn't have much left to prove in the minors. I mean, he's pretty old, so maybe we see them both this year. I still think they're going to play Carlos Santana, though, until at least like June, and I wouldn't be surprised if Santana bounced back a little bit. So not on either of those guys for this year. Definitely on Melendez if you're looking for a second Royals hitter after Bobby Witt. John Dobbs has a few questions here. First one, Jesus Sanchez, playing time concerns. Not playing time concerns, but where he hits in the lineup concerns a little bit. It did seem a while ago that maybe he could be the number 4 hitter. Worried now that maybe he enters the year as the 5th or 6th hitter. Of course, with all this depth, if Sanchez really scuffles, then we could start seeing some playing time concerns because they have guys that they can turn to. But more concerned about Sanchez's spot in the lineup now. He also wants to know, could Keston Hira beat out Rowdy Tellez? No, he couldn't. Hira, like Hira's a DH. Hira is he needs to just really, really rake to be the DH. And I don't know. I think seems unlikely to me. John also wants to know, do Miguel Vargas, Michael Busch, and Gavin Lux need to get traded? Naming 3 Dodgers prospects or former prospects there that all kind of play, second base, third base. I think Miguel Vargas has passed Gavin Lux in terms of who the Dodgers have more long-term belief in. Like Vargas, the way that they talk about him, it seems like he factors into their plans. Not necessarily this year, certainly not early this year, but it could be up later this summer. Busch and Lux could get traded. I think there'd be teams that would love to have those guys. The thing is, when you're the Dodgers, you just don't have why are you trading Busch and Lux? What are you getting back? What do the Dodgers need? The Dodgers just kind of have everything. I think trading a guy like Eddys Leonard or Yorbit Vivas for Craig Kimbrell makes a ton of sense. I mentioned that on a pod a couple months ago with Jeff Erickson. But I think Michael Busch and Gavin Lux are too good to trade for 1 year of Craig Kimbrell at an appropriate contract. So I think they're just going to sit on all their crazy depth. There'll probably come another time when it's time to go trade for a Max Scherzer, Trey Turner type of guy, and they'll put something good on the table. But if there's just what's the point of trading Michael Busch right now? Like, obviously it'd be great for our dynasty teams, but the Dodgers don't care about that. John also wants to know, Tommy Romero with the Rays, is he a starter or a reliever? I was looking at their depth chart earlier today, and man, I think Tommy Romero is starting to look like one of their 6 or 7 best options already. I don't really buy Luis Patino as a true starter. I think he's more of like a 3 or 4 inning guy. Romero is a guy with a modern fastball. He's on the 40-man roster, had success in the upper levels last year. So I think Romero's a great end game draft and hold target. I took him with the last pick of the Tout Wars draft and hold 50 rounder with 15 teams. And then we'll probably see Romero in the first half. Maybe he debuts as kind of a 2 to 3 inning guy. But I think Romero could have, let's say, 8 to 15 outings with the big club this year that are over 3 innings. And then we kind of go from there. So Romero's a good deep name to keep an eye on. Yukon Jack wants to know thoughts on Colton Cowser and Kobe Mayo and what are their ETAs in the Orioles system. I think Cowser is a little overrated right now. He still, to date, hasn't played at a age appropriate level or kind of a talent appropriate level, even dating back to college. So let's see how Cowser does at AA. Hit tool is very impressive. Let's just see how he does though once he kind of is facing legitimate pitching. And Kobe Mayo, I've talked about a lot. I love Kobe Mayo. I think he is. I've traded him in some dynasty leagues as a win now chip. He headlined a deal that Saris and I did in Devil's Rejects for Charlie Morton. But yeah, I mean, I think look up 3 years from now, Kobe Mayo could be one of the most exciting young hitters in the game. Cowser probably debuts next year if he kind of goes through AA and AAA without a ton of resistance. Kobe Mayo probably more like 2024. Friend of the show, Michael Parnell, who should have won that rock band bracket from a few months ago, wanted to know which prospect in the back half of the top 400 has the best chance to surprise this summer. either by getting to the big leagues or leaping into the top 100. I'll give a hitter and a pitcher. Hitter, Kalai Rosario with the Twins. Love his raw power. I think he could break out this year. Just got to watch the strikeouts with him. And then pitcher, Bryce Bonnin with the Reds. Big time stuff. Bonnin, if he stays healthy and throws strikes, he could be a big time riser this year. Tomorrow's Baseball Today wants to know if he should invest in Daniel Espino long term or cash him out. That just kind of comes down to your risk tolerance. It's kind of with a guy like Espino, who has a very high ceiling and could need Tommy John surgery at any moment. It's kind of like you're playing Russian roulette a little bit. So if you want to ride it out, you could have the number one pitching prospect in the game in a year. If you want to cash him out, chances are you won't regret that a ton. I think at some point something's probably going to go wrong with Espino. But it also comes down to what are you going to get for him? Like, you don't just say, okay, I'm trading Espino no matter what. Like, you have to see what's out there. Cheese Beef or Chaz Beef wants to know if I'm going to put out my surprising minor league assignments article this year. Definitely. That's one of the more useful articles I do each year. So I would say you could probably look for that sometime in April. J.H. Schroeder wants to know what makes me buy or not buy a guy that's putting up big numbers but is old for the level. With hitters, it's really it seems simple, but strikeouts and walks. Look at Vinny Pasquantino last year. Look at Dustin Harris last year. Look at Stephen Kwan last year. Strikeouts and walks. That's kind of a barometer of how real it is. If a guy is, there's some exceptions kind of to that rule. Not necessarily fully buying in, but a good example is Joey Weimer or Joey Weimer with the Brewers. He's got the walks, but he's also got a lot of strikeouts. But his power and speed are so intense that I ranked him top 75 because I think we just got to see. And like, it's not like he was just at low A all year and was mashing and then the season was over. He kept getting promotions. He kept performing. He got better with each stop. So like, let's just sort of see where this goes with a guy like that. But in general, we're looking at, well, how old is this guy? Like if a guy's 24 and they're an A ball, there's basically nothing they can do that would pique my interest until they get to double A. But if it's a 21 or 22-year-old and they're putting up Vinny Pasquantino numbers, then I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on. And Dustin Harris, a big part of buying in on him was just watching a lot of video, and it's you could just kind of see it when a guy just has that natural ability to get the barrel on the ball, really look the part. So that's what I'm looking for with hitters. With pitchers, you're just looking at what's the stuff like. Can you get any reports, public or private, on just what is the caliber of the stuff, how hard's the fastball, what's the movement characteristics, what's the spin on the breaking balls, what's the whiff rate on the off speed stuff. Because like there's a lot of guys, pitchers, who could put up great numbers in the lower levels just by commanding a few pitches or having a good changeup, that type of thing. Age doesn't matter that much to me with pitchers, though. It's kind of what's the stuff, how good's the stuff. Howard Sider wants to know, of the Mets' top position prospects, Brett Beatty, Francisco Alvarez, Mark Vientos, Ryan Mauricio, Khalil Lee, who's the most likely to get time with the club this year, and what type of impact can we expect? I don't think Beatty's up this year. I don't think Alvarez is up this year. I don't think Mauricio's up this year. Khalil Lee's kind of like their fifth or sixth outfielder entering the year, so I think we will probably see him at some point. Vientos is on the 40 man. There's not really anywhere for him to play, but I still think we probably see him via injuries or something like that. I don't think we're looking at much fantasy production from any of those guys though till 2023. And then Howard wanted to know if I prefer Beatty or Vientos long term. I think I'm one of the very few people who actually likes Vientos more than Beatty. Both of them are going to strike out. Beatty's going to take his walks more, but he's also going to hit the ball on the ground a lot more. Vientos has a perfect power stroke, and it's big time power. So I think they're both flawed. I just think Vientos is a better bet to get to 30 homers, which you kind of need to do if you're going to play third base. Let's hit another read here. Do you think your betting skills are good enough to win you tickets to the Final Four? It's time to put your money where your mouth is. Better Edge is giving away a trip for two to the Final Four in New Orleans. All you have to do is join their contest at betteredge.com/Final Four. Better Edge believes sports betting with no fees should be the norm, and odds are it's legal in your state. Check it out and enter their March Madness contest for a chance to win a trip to the Final Four. Head over to betteredge.com/Final Four. That's BETTOR edge.com/Final Four. Terms and conditions apply. All right, got a few more questions here, and we'll wrap things up. JLD wants to know he kept Shane Baz. In a keeper league with daily moves and 5 IL spots over Aaron Ashby, and wonders if he should reconsider. I think with the 5 IL spots, that's reasonable and fine. Would not do that in a normal league with, say, 7-man benches and no IL spots, but if you can stash Baz on the IL, I think that's fine. I like Ashby more than Baz now, as I said, and as I mentioned in the article that went up yesterday. People just keep sleeping on Ashby's upside. I think a lot of people just think there's a massive gap between Baz's upside and Ashby's upside. I definitely would give Baz the edge. If we're just going pitch by pitch, I think each guy has 3+ or better pitches. Baz probably has a couple 70 grade pitches. And I think we can trust Baz's command more than we can trust Ashby's. But Ashby has a edge in terms of team context. I think NL Central, that just is such a nice setup for Ashby. The Brewers, we're talking about two of the best teams at developing pitchers, but the Brewers are the best team at developing pitchers. So I like Ashby more than Baz, just because of the factor of you having to use a bench spot on Baz, and I don't expect Baz back until mid-May at the earliest. So you're talking about 6 weeks without him and him taking up a bench spot. But with the IL spots, I think it's fine to go Baz over Ashby. Morgan Day says he was watching James Outman, Toolsy outfielder with the Dodgers, and wants to know if he will ever get a look. He'll be up. He'll be kind of an up and down 5th or 6th outfielder for the Dodgers. He provides value on defense, and he's got some power and some OBP potential, but he's like 24, I think, or 25. And the Dodgers just have a bunch of these guys. Their 40 man is just loaded with like 25-year-old hitters who on a lot of other teams would be getting a chance to be everyday players, but on their team, they're just depth pieces. So I don't see a scenario where Outman gets a real look to be much more than like a 4th outfielder for them. Jake Tolson wants to know the % chance Riley Green breaks camp with the Tigers. I'll say 70%. It's not a lock, regardless of the reports that are up on our side and other sites. I think Green, there's been some strikeouts this spring, which isn't not a red flag at all, but let's just see how he's doing. We're all rushing to judgment on these guys. I'm guilty of that too, but let's look up in a week and see what Green is hitting, how many strikeouts he has, how many walks he has. I think they would like him to. I think they'd like Green and Torkelson to force their way onto that starting roster. But I don't think they're gonna enter the year with those guys as starters if they think there's a decent chance that they really struggle, because I think they'd just be much better to send them to AAA in that case. Ian Strada wants to know if I'd be worried in Dynasty about Chris Bryant getting traded down the line. Not really, because I think that contract is going to look really bad in short order. Like this is much more like a Charlie Blackmon contract than a Nolan Arenado contract. I don't think there will be teams willing to give the Rockies anything to take on that money. So I think I'm happy for Chris Bryant. Good job by Scott Boras. I thought his line, Scott Boras always cracks me up. He might have had the two lines of the offseason to me so far. When someone asked Scott Boras what the other teams that were interested in Chris Bryant were at the press conference where he was with the Rockies, Scott Boras said, when I go to a wedding, I don't talk about the bridesmaids. I thought that was an 80 grade line from Scott Boras. And then the other best line, I think, was from Buck Showalter when he was talking about, was it Ryan Flaherty or some old journeyman that made the Orioles a while ago for like a talent show. He brought some monkeys into the talent show, and that's why Showalter put him on the opening day roster. And then he said, in quotes, that took guts. So I could just picture Buck Showalter saying that, and that gave me a chuckle. But back to the Chris Bryant thing, like happy for him. Good for him for getting that money. But that's not going to be a value contract. The Rockies, I think, were kind of suckers for giving him that contract. And I just don't see another team giving them prospects to take it on. Maybe if the Rockies eat a bunch of that salary, but if you have Chris Bryant, I think it's going to play out just like the Charlie Blackmon deal. You're going to get him in Coors. He might be not productive towards the end, but I think he'll stick around for the whole deal. Christopher Galvin wants to know ceiling for Kyle Harrison of the Giants versus likely outcome. With a guy like Kyle Harrison, I don't think there is a likely outcome. So much could go wrong, so much could go right. So I don't want to say that, but he's got the stuff to pitch a top of rotation, even a really good rotation. He took a lot of strides down the stretch last year with his command. Big time stuff. I think Kyle Harrison kind of gets slept on a little bit when we're talking about the best pitching prospects who are ways away from the majors. Simon P. Now that Cody Morris is broken, who is the next Guardians pitching prospect that could step up? For those who didn't see, very unfortunate news about Cody Morris. He's out, I think, like 6 weeks at least with a shoulder injury. I wouldn't say he's broken. It's a setback, though, for sure. So he's not really rosterable unless it's a draft and hold at this point. But Connor Pilkington and Tobias Myers would be the two guys for me to keep an eye on in Cleveland. I think you'll see them ahead of guys like Peyton Battenfield and the good Logan Allen. Pilkington and Myers probably head to AAA. I think they're both on the 40-man. I've got them both ranked in the top 400. I could see them both becoming relevant at some point this year. Obviously not the same level of upside, though, with Cody Morris. And then Simon also wanted to know, which arm would I rather own in the Marlins system between Edward Cabrera and Max Meyer? And who comes up first? I'd rather have Max Meyer. I think Cabrera comes up first. He's already come up last year. So, but I think we see Cabrera again this year before we see Meyer. But Meyer, I think, is the better bet long term. Cabrera has a similar ceiling to Meyer. I just think Meyer is a safer bet, better command. Cabrera still gives me some kind of injury risk vibes that Meyer doesn't really. Obviously, either of them could get injured, but Cabrera's dealt with some arm issues in recent seasons, so I'll go with Meyer there. All right, that's going to wrap it up. Really appreciate everyone. Actually, look, I got some comments here. I'll see if I can hit these really quick. Mark Carr, any thoughts on when Rocchio will be up? Early 2023. Joseph Kitson, will O'Neal Cruz start right from the start of the season? Doesn't look like it. He also wants to know thoughts on Riley Green. I love Riley Green. I just took him in the third round of a 20-team Dynasty startup. I think he's going to be a 5-category guy. Although there's some strikeout issues, as I mentioned. Kyle Phillips, wondering if Noah Song is back from his military service. What can we expect from him? Not back. Forget the timetable on that. He had a really bright future, but it's a long time to not be pitching. So I think he's a fine stash in really deep leagues, but I don't think anyone can really say what to expect from him. Do I think, or Derek wants to know if I think Matt Brash starts the season in Seattle's rotation. And then he wants to know how likely it is that he can stick in it. I think he's legitimately competing for a spot in that rotation. I think he can win it this spring. Command is kind of the main thing for Brash, even more so, I think, than the third pitch. Obviously, the fastball slider is really devastating. I think he could probably get by. I think he could be a 5+ inning guy on just the fastball slider, kind of like Tanner Hawk, but just about the command with him. And I think the Mariners would give him a pretty long leash. He would have to really crash and burn. And then you might see a guy like George Kirby get a shot. And then Sean McKnight wants to know, is Aaron Ashby the next Brewers breakout? I've heard good things about his underlying metrics. Yeah, I think he is. I think he's just on pure stuff and talent. I think he's the 4th best pitcher on the team, or the 4th best starter on the team. And I don't really think there's, at the end of the season, I think people will think of Ashby and Freddie Peralta very similarly. Derek also wants to know, what's your outlook this season for Brandon Williamson? Well, you can read that on RotoWire.com, RotoWire.com/pod for free 10-day trial. But Williamson, I think he's got number 2 starter upside. He was the best prospect to be traded since the lockout ended in that Jesse Winker deal. The fastball is really a money pitch, money breaking ball, starter repertoire, starter command, great size for a lefty. So love Williamson. Bit of a downgrade though, going from Seattle to Cincinnati, especially given how bad they're going to be for a while. Brandon Patton wants to know, how much difference in talent is there between Marcelo Meyer, Jordan Lawler, and Khalil Watson? Meyer just has the most advanced hit tool and approach of the 3. Watson, I think, has the best combination of power and speed, and Lawler is kind of a mix of both those guys. All right, that's going to do it. This has been a lot of fun. A lot of questions. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Clay Link and I will be back with you next week.